You're listening to Word on the Reef, diving into marine science on the Great Barrier Reef and beyond, with Tanya Murphy and Brett Goodban. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Word on the Reef. I'm your host, diver and marine conservationist Tanya Murphy, and joining me, as always, is Cairns Aquarium's marine educator and resident fish whisperer, Brett Goodban.
Good morning, everyone. Morning, Tanya.
Now, before we dive into today's topic, it's time for some uplifting whale news.
Oh, this is amazing.
The first ever drone footage of a humpback whale giving birth has been captured off the New South Wales coast by drone pilot Alex Forrest, a volunteer with the Organisation for the Rescue and Research of Cetaceans, or ORCA. Late last month, Alex was filming a female humpback about 700 metres offshore near Kingscliff when he noticed the whale lagging behind the rest of her pod. Then he saw a spurt of blood in the water. So when I first watched this video, at first you think, is there a predator involved? But then moments later, a tiny whale calf just comes headfirst, shooting out, basically like a torpedo, and its tail is pumping, full of life. It swims to take its first breath on the surface, and then it's really cute because it just instinctively swims straight around to the front to look its mum in the eye. Yeah, I know. It's just such a magical moment.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? I've never seen that. That's the first time
me too.
In my career that I've ever seen that.
Apparently it's not the first time that a whale birth has been filmed, but previously it was filmed from like a boat, so the footage wasn't as good. So now that they've got this drone footage, you can really see. Yeah, and it's just so adorable the way that it feels human.
It does, and it's also just so special because we know their numbers have just gone, from 100 in the 80s to over 40,000 last year. And there's another one. You know what I mean? It's just so special. Yeah,
you see the mother looking in the calf's eye, and then they nuzzle each other, and then the calf gets on top.
Yep.
It gets on top of its mother's back, basically.
Yeah,
so
you can carry me to Osprey Reef. I'm not swimming all the way there by myself.
All right, well, be quiet in the back there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, are we there yet, Mum?
Yeah, it's so cute.
Yeah, it's pretty special.
And I've got another heartwarming whale story too.
Ooh.
And this one comes from Western Australia.
Yes.
A pod of dolphins appears to have befriended a lost juvenile southern right whale and helped guide it back to safety. The endangered whale entered the shallow Peel Harvey estuary near Perth on 28th of June and became stranded after the tide receded. At more than 10 metres long and with almost 2 metres draft, the whale struggled to navigate the shallow waters, raising fears it might not survive. But while it was trapped, the whale appears to have befriended the local dolphins and was seen swimming and playing alongside them on multiple occasions.
Stop.
Then, on the 17th of July, onlookers watched as the dolphins escorted the whale back towards deeper water. So there's a photo of the juvenile southern right whale with the dolphins all in a formation around it, like they're herding it.
They're protecting it.
Yeah, and so scientists say this isn't the first time dolphins have been observed helping whales. There have been previous reports of dolphins using this type of herding behaviour and vocalisations to guide whales away from danger. So it's really heartwarming to see the marine life looking out for each other.
What a beautiful way to start our show.
Absolutely.
Isn't that awesome?
Love a bit of positive news.
Mammals helping mammals.
Yeah, I'm making a resolution. I need to dig up more positive.
Yeah, we'll do that. We're positive first 2 minutes of our show. So you can sit there with your cup of tea and ice Vovo and going, oh, what a nice way to start the day.
But now, let's get on to today's topic,
Yes,
and it's a really interesting one. A group of Magnetic Island residents believes annual maintenance dredging carried out by the Port of Townsville may be creating sediment plumes that smother some of the island's pristine bays, coral reefs and marine life. And with the port now applying for a 10-year permit to continue the dumping at its current site, they're calling for community members to have their say. So if you listen to our interview with Magnetic Island marine biologist Lawrence Shiel back in Season 2, Episode 2, you'll know this beautiful island in Cleveland Bay is surrounded by spectacular fringing reefs and is home to turtles, manta rays, dugongs and an extraordinary diversity of marine life. But Magnetic Island also sits just 10 kilometres from the Port of Townsville, exporting minerals and sugar while importing fuel and other essential goods. The port is connected to national shipping routes by a 14-kilometre long shipping channel that passes along the eastern side of Magnetic Island. To keep it navigable, dredging is typically carried out over 4 to 5 weeks every year. The dredged material is then tipped back into the ocean at a dredged material placement area less than 10 kilometres upwind of some of Magnetic Island's best-known snorkelling sites, including Jeffrey Bay and Nellie Bay.
Yeah.
The port says on its website that its state and federally approved dredging management plan incorporates the principles of ecologically sustainable development. But not everyone on Magnetic Island is convinced. One of these residents joins us today. Gethin Morgan is president of the Magnetic Island Nature Care Association, or MINCA. Good morning, Gethin, and welcome to Word on the Reef.
Good morning.
Thanks for joining us.
It's great to have you on the show. Now, before we dive into this murky issue, can you tell us a bit about yourself, Gethin, and your background?
I'm an ecologist. I work with the Queensland Environment Department for over 20 years, and I was their senior scientist in North Queensland. I retired in 2012. The main focus of my work was landscape survey and planning and management using the survey as a basis. Initially, I was working on the terrestrial reserve network and then bioregional planning to support it, tree clearing controls, critical habitat for threatened species and those sorts of issues. I've lived on the island now over 30 years and I've been president of Magnetic Island for the last 12.
Gethin, our online version of this show has listeners all over Australia and the world, and some people may have never seen a dredging barge. And to be fair, I haven't been up real close to one myself.
No,
most people haven't.
We've passed a few.
Oh, yeah, sometimes when you go out in your boat, you see it, but you don't really know exactly how it works. So can you please explain the process of dredging and how it's carried out?
Sure. There's two different types of dredging. One is a periodic one where there's a need to give berths or widen the channel or something like that, where fresh mud is actually dredged. So that's hard, firm seabed. That's normally carried out with a grab or a bucket or something that can take out big lumps of hard clay.
A backhoe type thing on a barge. Yep.
Yeah, essentially. That's called capital dredging, and these days the ports aren't allowed to dump that at sea. But they are using it to reclaim along the edges of the World Heritage Area for port expansion. So there is an issue with that, but that's not our main issue. Our main issue at the moment is this 10-year application for maintenance dredging. So every year the ports have to go into their access channels and take out any silt that's accumulated. So that's a slurry. So that's done with a boat the size of a small coastal steamer, if you like, which trails suctions on either side of it, and it drives along the channel, sucking the loose mud into a big hopper on top of it, and then it steams out to the dumping site, opens up big doors underneath the boat and just dumps the spoil into the water.
So I've seen a video of this. So they lower these tubes to the seafloor and sort of use them to suck up the silt. Gethin, what impact are you alleging that this dredging and dumping might be having on Magnetic Island?
Well, look, just for a little bit of background for those who don't know the area, Townsville's on Cleveland Bay. Now, Cleveland Bay is this large, sheltered, shallow, north-facing bay, and Magnetic Island sits at the head of the bay. So it encloses this lovely sheltered, seagrass-rich, coral-rich refugia, if you like. It's a very protected habitat, regionally significant for all sorts of things. Snubfin dolphins, dugongs, sharks, rays. Lawrence talked a little bit about that. There's a huge diversity of habitats. And we've all known this for years, so there's a high level of protection. So not only is it part of the World Heritage Area, there's marine parks, green, yellow, blue, there's fish habitat area, there's dugong protection area covering the entire bay. So all of this is where the port is working. So they're well aware of these values too. So the access channel for the port runs between Cape Cleveland, which is at the eastern end of the bay, and Magnetic Island in the centre of the bay. When they've dredged it, they take the dredge spoil out to the dumping ground, which is midway between Magnetic Island and Cape Cleveland, and then it's dumped into the waters there, which are about 12 to 14 metres deep. Now, because that's relatively shallow, with the winds, the southeast winds hitting it there, because it's on the edge of the bay, it's out of the cover of Cape Cleveland, the wave action disturbs that and resuspends that sediment at least 1 week in 3 through the year. Some seasons worse than others, depending on the winds, of course. And because it's the most mobile silt, the stuff that ends up in the channel all the time, it's silt. It's muddy water, and it just drifts around the bay according to winds and tides. Mud now drifts around the entire bay, so it's not just in the island, it's affecting the entire bay.
So you're saying that even outside of the 4, because the dredging typically only takes 4 to 5 weeks each year, but you're saying that for the whole rest of the year, the wave action just continues to stir up that sediment, so it becomes almost a year-round problem.
Yeah.
Exactly. When they're actually doing the dredging, there is a plume, and it does affect the island, and it can be pretty nasty, but it's the more chronic, long-term impacts that are the most threatening to the natural values.
Mm.
So some of the places that are beloved by snorkelers and tourists, like Jeffrey Bay, are some of the ones that you're concerned about the impacts. But how do we know places like Jeffrey Bay haven't always had this murky water and a damaged reef just naturally from the natural sediments that are coming out of the Ross River into Cleveland Bay? Yeah,
look, the port dump site's moved around a bit, but it's only been out at the current site since about 1993. I think they moved out to there. But prior to that, in 1965, a marine scientist on the island described the fringing reefs on the island. So in 1965, they were equal to anything on the outer reef. Mm. And the water clarity then was consistently more than 10 metres. And Florence Bay, underwater visibility could often exceed 15 metres.
Wow.
That's decent.
So, and early photos from that time show that the reef flats, like at Jeffrey Bay and Florence Bay, were flourishing. They were covered in coral. Those reef flats now are essentially silt covered and very, very little coral, little fragments struggling to survive in the silt.
Oh, that's really sad, because we've learned from the likes of Lawrence Schill and his amazing documentary about Magnetic Island that it is such an important marine habitat, and it is home to really diverse marine life and coral, but he knows where to find that stuff in the less affected areas. Whereas when I've only actually been to Magnetic Island once, and when I first went snorkeling, I was, to be honest, a bit disappointed, because I obviously don't know where to go to find the good stuff. I'm not a local there, but yeah, in the middle of Jeffrey Bay, and so unfortunately it is not. There isn't a lot of thriving coral in that spot, so it's definitely noticeable. Mm. And when I saw some of the photos on your MINCA website of how much coral there used to be in Jeffrey Bay, I felt a bit sad. Yeah, and I can't even imagine for the locals who have been there all that time and watched that happen.
Yeah, there are areas where the currents and the waves keep moving the silt around and away. The coral and the ecosystems there are doing better. Mm. But on the reef flats where the silt settles out and the flats around to the western side of the island, they're smothered with mud regularly.
The port has been carrying out regular maintenance dredging since 1883, according to its website, so it's not a new thing, this dredging. Why do you believe these impacts have only been observed in recent decades?
Look, they've been observed for longer than that. But as you say, it's been going on for years, and up until about 1965, they were dumping between the island and the mainland. So they've moved the site 5 or 6 times, and every time they've moved it, it's been because of the obvious impact it was having. So starting with the 65 move, it was making such a mess of the place that the local state member first Tucker stood up in Parliament and described the silt as a disgusting sort of ooze, they're his words, that was damaging the reefs and beaches, and there's photos at the time of it ankle deep on Palarenda. The dump site was then moved to off Picnic Bay, and Picnic Bay succumbed to the silt then, and then it was moved further out to off Nellie Bay, and Nellie Bay became similarly affected. And then they finally moved it out to the current site in about 1993. The issue with the current site is not only is it out there where it's spreading all over the place, the port has also recently deepened and widened its channel. So there is also more maintenance dredging to be done, and the increase in quantities with this widening and deepening of the channel is taken it from about 450,000 cubic metres a year to over 550,000 cubic metres a year. So this current site and the impact it's having is only going to get greater. And of course there's issues associated with climate change. We've now got more wind and wave and more extreme events. So we're very concerned about the business as usual.
I saw some images on your website as well that shows that over time this dumping site does sort of mound up, right? And so it's getting shallower over time, would you say?
That's what the early reports were saying. The port has told us more recently that those mounds aren't as obvious. So I don't know, I haven't seen the data, but they're saying that the bay is not as mounded as it used to be. They're also arguing at the same time that on the one hand, where they're dumping the spoil, it's not having any impact, but on the other hand, nor is it getting shallower, so it's going somewhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What emotional impact has this had on you, seeing these changes in the reefs you love?
Look, it's awful. When we first came to the island in about 93, we'd drive over the headland between Nellie Bay and Arcadia, or Jeffrey Bay, and you'd look down into Jeffrey Bay, and when it was windy, the bay would be, murky, but Jeffrey Bay itself was clean, and it still had good coral in through there. And within a few years of the dump site being moved out further out into the bay there, Jeffrey Bay on a windy day would be as murky, if not murkier, than the rest of the bay. So we've got all the other issues of warming waters and acidification and so on. But the coral used to bounce back. It used to come back, but now it's struggling to survive, let alone come back.
Yeah, well, it's got that on top of everything else, doesn't it, at the moment? Just compounding it.
Right.
Yeah. Gethin, how can you be sure that the sediment plumes you're seeing at Magnetic Island aren't from another source like agricultural runoff?
Well, the only watercourse of any note that empties into the bay, that would likely bring in that sort of runoff is Ross River. And with its weirs and dams, there's very little that comes down that. So the other potential source of sediment, of course, is the Burdekin River, which also now has the big dam in it too. So there's less coming down from there, despite the degraded nature of a lot of its catchment. But a lot of that coarse silt is trapped closer to the coast, and very little of it actually moves around into Cleveland Bay. And the last figures the port have on their website is about 50,000 cubic metres per year coming in, and they're dredging about 450,000 at least at the moment. So if it is coming from there, it's a very small component. And look, back in the 80s, there was quite a bit of work done on the sediment in the bay, and that clearly showed that over the hard basement of the bay, there is a thick layer of dredge spoil. It covers the entire bay, so we've known it since at least then, and that's the loose mobile stuff that's being disturbed all the time. Now, last year, we were fortunate that when the maintenance dredging program was underway, we had some very clear, still days. So we've got satellite imagery of the spoil being released out at the dump site and moving in waves towards the island. And then we've got some drone footage of just this massive front of silt-laden water approaching Jeffrey Bay and consequently wrapping itself around the island.
I think we saw that one. We actually had a look at that photo before we came on air. And
I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, Tanya's looking at it.
You can see a very noticeable...
Yeah, that's right. It's pretty evident that that's the issue that's happening, and it's heading straight for the bay, isn't it? The evidence is there.
So it's entirely contrary to what the port is saying with their modelling. They're saying it doesn't move far from the dump site at all. That was on a still day. If they dump while it's windy or there's currents around, it's even more mobile, but because the bay is stirred up at the same time, it tends to get lost in the turbidity of the general bay. But on a clear day, it's quite clear what's happening.
Yeah, I'm looking at the satellite image now, and there's clear plumes originating from the point exactly where a load has just been dumped, and you can see them. They are moving towards Magnetic Island and then sort of to the north and around. And, you know, I'm not a hydrologist, so I can't definitively say whether there's plumes from other sources that are sort of intervening in there, but it's very obvious because the prevailing winds off the Queensland coast are southeasterly that it's going to push anything in that direction towards the island, and that's what it appears on this satellite image.
When that dump site was established back in 93, the studies for that site warned that there would be chronic leakage from there. So that was in 93. In 2013, SKM was contracted by Gabumpa to do modelling from that site because of community concerns, and that modelling predicted heavy sedimentation around the island as well. So none of it's a surprise, it's just ongoing.
What about tourism operators on the island? What do they think about this issue? Have any of them been outspoken about it?
The tourism operators are just having to live with it, and while they will look for the best coral for their visitors to see, and so avoid the worst of it, if you like, when the water is muddy, either from the dredging operation itself or the consequent leakage from the site, it's giving the island a bad reputation. So people say, you know, we'll go somewhere else where it's clearer. And they are concerned about losing tourism from the island. And look, another issue that's not being raised at the moment is the trichodesma blooms we're getting. They appear to be becoming more and more frequent. Now, in the past, trichodesma was always seen as something that got going as an algal bloom, if you like, out in the lagoon proper. It remains to be seen whether or not it's developing more frequently and more locally because of the nutrient load that's accumulated in Cleveland Bay. So that's also affecting tourism, because now we can have 3 or 4 days of rotting trichodesma along the shorelines, and if you go swimming in that, you're going to have an infected ear and probably a tummy upset.
Yeah, anyone who's been listening to our show since last year will know the devastating impacts of that harmful algal bloom in South Australia.
Terrible.
That's really harmed the tourism industry, and the last thing we need is things like that happening on our Great Barrier Reef. So, yeah, you mentioned that you've raised your concerns with the port, and what's been their response, Gethin?
Look, many times, and they've been very generous in the time they've given us, but they refuse to recognise that they are having an impact, and despite community concerns, they're not prepared to move the dump site.
Surely there's been some really in-depth environmental studies done in this area to use as evidence for something happening.
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you?
Well, I kind of would. Yes.
Well, they entered into what's called a Section 19 deed of agreement to do various research, the port that is, and one of the new research programs that they committed to doing was a in-depth analysis of alternative sites and the relative impacts of the different sites. Now, they were due to be completed by 2019. They weren't done. They dragged their feet, and eventually in 2024-5, they did a quick and dirty desktop, and that identified a deep water site as having environmental benefits, as being the best place to go for the environment. They ran that past the local community. We all agreed with moving to a deep water site. The port looked at all that information and decided that logistically it wasn't possible for them to move. So it was going to take too long to get out there and this and that.
So the benefits of moving to a deeper site is that the sediment won't get stirred up by waves so easily. Is that the gist of the...
That's the gist of it. Once you get deeper than about 20 metres, there's very little wave disturbance, and it's an issue of currents then. And that's why the detailed modelling of these deeper water sites needs to be done. Well, despite their commitments to do these studies, the detail hasn't been there. They've looked at their current site in detail, but not at the alternative sites and where it might go from those alternative sites.
So right now I'm looking at the alternative dredge material placement area options analysis on your website.
Crikey, how much did that cost?
So options analysis, it's got various sites. So just it looks about less than 10 k's to the north of Magnetic Island, and then some that are further out. And so a community survey indicated Area C was most preferred, and Area C, if my eyes serve me correctly, is just really far out. It's quite far out. So that means it would have the benefit of being deeper, so the waves won't stir the sediment up, but also the prevailing southeasterly winds will not push any sediment that there is onto Magnetic Island. So I can see why the community preferred that site. But why do you believe the port doesn't want to move sites, Gethin?
Well, we prefer that site if it's not going to have an impact on other areas. So we need that modelling done to make sure that it's not going to go all up to Palm Island or further north. So with that rider, the port is reluctant to move out there because of the steaming times. The harbour master has also apparently told the port that he doesn't want the dredge vehicle moving close to moored boats out there. So they've got a detour around the mooring places offshore there. So there are a number of logistic reasons that the port believes that they can't do it. But the logistics are just a challenge to be solved. None of it's insoluble. And we just believe the port has a duty of care, not to mention the precautionary principle.
So what else are you and the Magnetic Island Nature Care Association, what are you asking for the solutions to this issue?
Yep.
Well, our preferred response is for the port to work with the department, in the EPA, the new EPA, or the sea dumping people in Canberra, to work out a compromise whereby they use the existing dump site sparingly while independent surveys are done of the alternative sites, and that the federal government, Gaboompa, and the port recognise the values of this area and that they really do have to treat them seriously and do the necessary work to minimise the environmental impact of the port.
So the port is now applying for a permit to continue dumping in the same site for 10 more years, and there's a public consultation open. So what can people do to be part of that community consultation process?
Well, the best thing to do is to make a submission on the port's application and oppose the port getting a 10-year permit to do the same thing, and insist that these alternative deep water sites be properly and independently evaluated before the federal department considers their new application. I think it would also be worthwhile lobbying the federal department directly to make sure that there's a proper assessment done. As the last World Heritage report on the Reef, it's currently as a draft before the World Heritage Commission, the threatened nature of the reef, this last report has recommended a proper assessment of the impacts of maintenance dredging. We all know it has an impact, and we want to reduce it.
Yeah, so I'll be able to put the link for the consultation process on our website. Yep. I'll put it in the show notes. But people can also find it on... Will you put it on the MINCA website as well, Gethin?
We'll put a link to the Port of Townsville website, but people can go straight to the Port of Townsville website, and they've got a lot of info there. Our website also has got a lot of background information, including the stuff you've been referring to. The other thing on our website is we've got some archived information from when the port expansion project was proposed, and we were consulting with the port over that, under a Clearwater Townsville page on our website. So if they search Clearwater Townsville on our page, that will come up too with some more historical information.
What about local council? Surely there's some councillors at Magnetic Island or in that region that you guys can go to help you with your cause. I mean, you can't be just on your own, can you?
Well, look, I'm sorry to say we pretty much are. The councils, it's not part of council's business and they're not engaging with it because the port, of course, makes a very important contribution to North Queensland's economy and Townsville in particular, but so does tourism.
That's right.
Magnetic Island alone added something like $380 million per annum over the last few years on average. So it's not insignificant.
No.
We've had a letter writing campaign to the various state departments as well and the federal office, and basically it's come back to being between the port and the federal department.
Yeah.
So we're left only with those two people. Comment to the port, which we've been doing, but now we've actually got a application in front of us. We can explicitly refer to that, and once that's before the federal department, letting them know of everyone's concerns would also contribute to its proper assessment and consideration.
Gethin, was there anything else you wanted to talk about?
Oh, yes, I'd just like to stress that I think moving it to a deeper side is a really positive outcome for everyone. I mean, depending on the results of better work, it means huge improvements in the health of the bay and its resilience to what's coming. It would mean less silt moving around the bay. The whole bay would have a chance to slowly stabilise and be bioturbonated so that it supports a stable base community, a benthic community, and it would mean less material moving into the channel, so less dredging and so less quantities to deal with. And so then, the port could seriously consider alternative options to sea dumping. So, it's part of a long-term program of continual improvement, which, the port's required to do under the Reef 2050 plan and under the long-term dredge management plan. They're all expecting improvement. Well, this is not improvement. Improvement would be a good thing for everyone, and I don't understand why the port won't embrace it.
It does seem like there could be an alternative outcome which could be the best of both worlds that could benefit everyone, and even for those not on Magnetic Island who just like to take a walk along the beaches of Townsville, it might even have an impact to the water quality there. You never know.
Most certainly would.
Gethin Morgan, President of the Magnetic Island Nature Care Association, thanks for all your amazing work, and thanks for joining us on Word on the Reef today.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure, and thank you for putting in all your love and care for that environment. We need more people like you. Good job.
Okay. Thanks, Brad.
Absolutely. Have a fabulous weekend.
Thanks, Daniel. You too. Bye.
After speaking with Gethin, we wrote to the Port of Townsville offering them the opportunity to respond, either with a phone interview or a written response. They sent a written response, so we've included a link to it in the show notes if you'd like to check it out. The public consultation on this dredging permit closes next Tuesday, the 25th of August, 2026. Please check the episode description for links to more information and the email addresses to send your submissions to. Any citizen who cares about Magnetic Island, the reef, marine wildlife, and tourism can have your say.
That's all for this week. Best fishers.
Safe diving. Bye.